have such sights to show you. We're Poppin the Scary Horror Podcast here. I'm your host, Coale, and with me, as always, I have my good friend and co-host, Aaron. Aaron!
Hey!
Hey, what's up, bud?
Nothing much.
All right,
Happy
sweet.
New Year.
Yes, this was the very first episode to be released in 2023, so Happy New Year to you as well.
Woo!
So, you looking forward to anything towards the new year or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being a 3 now instead of a 2 on the end. I can't believe we're in 2020. I still think we're in 2020.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah,
Time hasn't really progressed since then. But...
I feel like we're just in sequels of 2020.
Yeah. Speaking of sequels.
Oh!
Saw 20 to it's just 2.
Divided by 10, yeah, to leave it to 2.
Yeah.
Yes, so we are reviewing the sequel to Saw, which definitely, if you haven't listened to our thoughts on the first one, definitely go back and listen to it. But from what I remember correctly, you seem to enjoy it fairly.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good time. It was, it was kind of sort of a movie locked into the era in which it was filmed. It had that old early 2000s sort of feel to it.
Yeah.
But it was cool. I liked it. I liked the concept. I liked the weird text message right before 9/11. I don't know why that's the primary thing I remember instead of the actual plot of the film. But, no, it's neat. Yeah, that was one I was excited to see because of just how much it was parodied in the time that I was growing up. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Saw 2: Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how it is for me to watch it, because I only recently binged the Saw series like last year or the year before. I don't know. It's weird. You kind of mentioned about the after 2020 thing, because I feel like time has just kind of been a hodgepodge of Play-Doh, and kind of all the years have mixed in together. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how my watch is the second time round, because a lot of people, whenever they talk about the Saw franchise, this is usually the one they debate over which one is better, the first two typically there. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or precedents or hopes, worries about the sequel.
Man, I don't even have any expectations, because all of my things that I expected, I feel like were from Saw. You know what I mean? Like the first one. And now as a second movie, I mean, I guess I have the expectation that little clown's gonna be doing some wacky mini games again. But other than that, I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna elevate it. I don't have any impressions about Saw 2. So
yeah, I won't give too much away, since obviously I've seen it before. Just so I don't spoil you or the audience per se. But I am curious to see how I feel, and I'm very curious to see how you feel after watching this. So yeah, don't have really a lot of context leading up to it there, so you guys stay buckled up, as we'll be right back whenever we watch Saw 2. Dos. I don't know any other words into.
I'm out.
There will be blood.
Tell me where he is.
He's in a safe place.
And we are back from watching Saw 2.
We saw it.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we saw it. We saw the second one, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tooth one.
The tooth.
Anyways, so be toothful with me.
Okay.
What were your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of like the first one with the, some fun new twists and some fun new games and some fun new man-made horrors beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, it was, I feel like maybe it's been enough time since I've seen the first one that I've forgotten, but like, I feel like it's even like gorier and crazier than the first. But
you are not misremembering that. That is completely accurate, and that's why whenever I tell people about, the Saw franchise, because they say like, "Oh, I don't watch the Saw franchise. It's like torture porn," and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "No, like the first one isn't. Second one, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that definitely starts
Oh.
it up there."
Oh yeah.
And so that's why I tell people I believe that when it comes to the film that encompasses the entirety of the Saw series, the stigma that it receives today, it starts with this one. That's
Mm.
my firm opinion, because in the first one there really isn't a whole lot, as we've talked about previously, but this
Mm-hmm.
one, yeah, definitely is like, no, it's going to amp up the blood and everything there.
Oh yeah.
And first time round, it was definitely hard for me to watch, and so second time round, knowing like what deaths there were, because again, that's kind of the whole thing about the Saw series, is like the traps that are
Mm-hmm.
there and the
Right.
ways people die. I remember that a lot, so it was like, okay, I'm prepared for this now.
Mm-hmm.
So it had a very interesting experience, because this is the second time I've seen it, and
Right.
I'm really curious to compare notes to see how it is your first time versus my second time round, and kind of seeing the whole series there. So I guess we'll dive into the plot of the story, which basically focuses on a detective who finds out that his son goes missing,
Mm-hmm.
and while he gets a pickup on this murder that happens early on in the beginning of the film,
Mm-hmm.
it leads him directly to the Jigsaw Killer, or John Kramer,
Mm-hmm.
as we come to find out later. And so it's at that moment he also realizes that his son has been kidnapped and thrown into one of Jigsaw's games, and it's
Mm-hmm.
up to him to try to save his son while also dealing with the Jigsaw Killer,
Yeah.
and how very manipulative and tricky he is. Or I wouldn't say manipulative. He's
Well,
very tricky. I think that's the word.
yeah, yeah. He
Mhm.
he loves to talk in riddles and give people clues and put people in
Yeah.
escape rooms.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so I feel like for like a sequel, I feel like the story idea is perfectly fine, as
Yeah.
opposed, because again, like in the first film you're slowly figuring out everything, because you open up and you have no idea what the world is like or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. But this one, you kind of knew what to expect more this time round. As you mentioned before, you're expecting traps
Right.
and everything, clown shenanigans, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, it's a fairly smart choice, because really, with where Saw 1 ends, it's kind of hard to pick up directly, with that, considering there's not many people you could follow afterwards.
Right.
So I feel like plot wise, it makes perfect sense, and it does something very interesting to where the detective kind of realizes he's also in one of Jigsaw's games. It's just a different aspect of it. So I feel
Right.
like they do interesting stuff with the plot there. So I could definitely appreciate how they looked at it story wise, and they're like, okay, what more can we do in this universe?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a sort of fun way to do two storylines at once, or like two plots at once. Because there are two games at once, really. Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the detective's trying to solve the mystery of where his son is in like 2 hours, and if he doesn't, then his son will die. Apparently, so he's trying to solve that while his son and a bunch of other characters that we haven't mentioned yet are all locked in one of Jigsaw's games, and they're trying to figure out how to get out in the same kind of time frame.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about the characters. And I guess we might as well start with the supposed protagonist, I guess, I suppose.
Yeah.
And let's talk about Detective Eric Matthews, played by Donnie Wahlberg.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I feel like the idea of his character is fine, and I feel like Donnie does a fine job, but he does get a little goofy.
He's a little Mark Wahlberg, but he's Donnie instead.
Yes, that's pretty much a great description of it, because I don't really have a big issue with it or anything, but the problem I have with it is the fact that I don't quite get attached to him as I did with Dr. Gordon or Adam in the very first
Yeah.
film. But again, that was very character focused. towards the beginning half. And, it's just basically Donnie's a cop who has anger issues, and he's also a father.
Right. He's
There.
a loose cannon cop who doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah, basically like that. Basically, cop with an attitude, usual stuff. And so it is interesting how it's pretty much an analysis of him. Because, again, that's kind of what Jigsaw does as a person, is he kind of just screws with you on a mental level, kind of digs into your own psyche and kind of lets you know why you're being put in this position there.
Right.
So I guess that's where I got like the wrong word, like manipulative. It's not so much that, it's just he screws with you, both on a physical and emotional level.
Right.
But I mean, in all honesty though, like you could like just say, oh yeah, he's like over the top ridiculous there. But I think with this film, it's good. I feel like it helps keep the theme and vibe consistent throughout. So I never really had too much of an issue with his performance. I felt like he went there, did a good job there. He had to convey a whole lot of emotions there, whether he's angry, depressed. That's pretty much the two vibes there. Sometimes he's chill.
Yeah, I feel like he's angry, depressed. I feel like at times he even feels guilty, and he's definitely. I mean, like pretty much everybody in these kind of movies have to be, they're on a short time span that they have, so they're all anxious, and it's hard to convey those emotions without being over the top or too dramatic or whatever. Whenever it's a life or death scenario, but I feel like he does a good job. Good job, Donnie.
Yeah. Good job, Donnie. Good job, Donnie. It's hard to be in your brother's shadow, but you do a good job.
He really is, though, like generic Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah,
but it's cool.
but he's still good.
Yeah.
So no diss, nothing but good thumbs up there. And we might as well talk about his son, Daniel Matthews, played by Eric Knudsen. And again, I feel like writing wise, they don't give him too much there, but I mean, they do a good job. Well, I would say he does a good job of conveying that, he's a kid that gets in trouble, but again, it's established early on that his dad, doesn't really, he's not a really good father figure there pretty much. And you could tell that, Daniel isn't like a bad kid. He just does stupid stuff because, again, he's a teenager there.
Yeah.
And so you start to see a little bit more of his humanity whenever he is kind of thrown in the trap there. So I do appreciate it there, but again, I can't say he's like, oh, he's such a deep, engrossing character. It's just kind of more like, I mean, I feel like he does a good job there. You feel sympathetic towards him being in this trap there, which is more than what you could say about some of the other survivors.
True.
There, because that's the other interesting thing, because like as compared to the first film, where it focuses on the two in the current trap they're in, and aside from the other traps that you see like past Jigsaw victims were in, this one is just like a whole group, kind of slasher group of characters there, which I'm sure whenever you saw that huge group of characters, you're like, this cannot be good.
Yeah. These guys are gonna die one by one, aren't they?
Yes.
I've seen this before.
Exactly. And I guess we'll just kind of go through a lot of the quickies there.
Yeah.
If I can remember everyone again, because again, there is a big number, but one of the people is returning from the first film is Shawnee Smith, who plays Amanda.
Yeah.
And if you remember her from the first film, she was in the bear trap, and I thought it was a really interesting idea that she was back in the trap again.
Right. She returns.
Because, they established early on, again, light spoilers for Saw, but I figure if you're listening to this episode, you probably know what happens. She survived the trap the first time she got caught in.
Yeah.
And so the second time she's brought in, she's just kind of, again, confused, like, no, I beat the trap there. But again, it's kind of revealed on multiple reasons as to why she's back.
Right.
In the trap there, and I feel like it was a cool idea. Keeps something from the original film to bring back to this film, keeps the universe kind of a little more heavy, and so I feel like it adds an interesting aspect to have somebody who's been through the trap kind of be there to also give like exposition as needed there. But I feel like Shawnee Smith does a really good job. That's also another character that, again, I enjoyed seeing around and she does a good job there. And as more stuff is revealed about her character, it just kind of helps, again, flesh her out a little bit compared to the first film, where she's kind of meant to be an example of Jigsaw's philosophy on the traps.
Yeah, and it's cool that she's can kind of give context to the other characters a little bit, because they're kind of a slow group in the beginning.
Oh
to
my
figure things
goodness,
out, but,
yes.
So she kind of gets the game running a little faster, but.
Yeah, and well, in contrast to characters I did enjoy, one character that is very questionable is Xavier, played by Frankie G.
Yeah.
And to Frankie G's credit, I feel like Frankie G did exactly what the script wrote.
Yeah.
However, what the script called for, it's just aggravating. It's like, yes, I get that human beings as a whole can be like this, but it is just like one of those, like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
like,
he's just a big turd.
Yes, yeah, huge, jerkwad that pretty much is starting a lot of the stuff there, because again, a lot of the group is slow there, and he's slow, but he's quick to anger and just being violent. That's usually his answer to stuff.
He wants to be in control of things, and he's also not interested in playing this game, really. He's like trying to bash his way out of the house, and it's just like, fuck this is stupid, and he doesn't want to cooperate with anyone. He's like definitely not an escape room kind of guy, really. It's just not his Saturday morning activity. But
yeah, it's like one of those mixed things where it's like, I get it, but it's also at the same time just like, especially watching it the second time around, I'm like, come on, dude. This guy
just work with people, come on.
Yeah, but again, it's also, I don't know, it's hard whenever it comes to unlikable characters. It's hard to know whether they're doing a good job in the writing department there, or if it's just kind of like a, how do we make this situation really bad? We have a huge hothead.
Yeah.
There, but I mean, to Frankie G's credit, I totally believe that he was a major asshole. So,
and he in particular makes a lot of questionable decisions, but I will say in this movie in particular, I feel like they have a pretty good excuse for any questionable decisions. It's not only that they're like on a timer trying to get out and not die and solve these games and stuff, but they're also like, all the people in the house are like affected by some sort of nerve agent that's making them like cough up blood and shit. So like, I feel like that's gotta fuck with your brain, and you probably make some hasty decisions that you wouldn't otherwise. So Xavier, yeah, he does some really stupid stuff, but like, I get it. He's a big meathead that's like just out of jail, and he's like, he's an asshole, but I understand what he's doing, even though he's still a piece of shit.
Which, I mean, that's good. Yeah. It's good because like, I never know, kind of like, it's hard for me to like judge whether like, like, say for instance in the Game of Thrones, like whenever they have Joffrey, who's like an absolute degenerate of a human being there, but again, like, even though his character is like awful, it's just what the story calls for there, and so it's hard to know, just kind of like stuff like that, whether it's like it's a good thing to hate the character. Yeah, it's just like that questionable line.
Sometimes you get the audience in sort of a love to hate him sort of feeling, and that could be good. Yeah, I don't know if Xavier's a love to hate or if you just hate kind of character, but I thought he served the story well. But,
well, that's good. Yeah. That's good. We'll jump over to some of the other characters too. Fortunately, unfortunately, You Be the Judge did not get developed to where you really felt anything there. Yeah. Like, for instance, Jonas, played by Glenn Plummer, who's supposed to be like the older, like, let's calm down and think this through sort of person. And I feel like, unfortunately, with like what the story time is allowed, they don't hardly get any development. It's just like, he seems like the cool-headed one.
Yeah.
There, and I just feel like overall it's just fine there. And moving down the line, we have like Addison, played by Emmanuel Vagier, who plays like kind of like the hot-headed, person who's like doesn't deal with any BS whatsoever. But I feel like overall does fine, just is another one to bounce conversation off of.
Right.
Same with Beverly Mitchell, who plays Laura, who's again the more quiet.
Yeah, she's kind of like the panicking, quiet one.
And then we have Abby, played by Timothy Bird, who really doesn't say anything. He's just this quiet dude.
Mysterious guy. Yeah. Who's this fella?
Yeah, and I don't know, that those are all the survival people, and then we have like a whole lot of like police people, which again I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, I don't know, it just feels bad just with the amount of like character development they have. It's like very minuscule.
Yeah, there's just so many characters that, yeah, a
Hmm.
lot of them end up just being sort of caricatures out of necessity because they only have
Hmm.
very limited screen time, and
Yeah,
most
because
of it's just yelling back and forth because they're spending the whole time trying to interrogate the jigsaw dude or like figure out what this little puzzle's all about.
yeah, because they have like Carrie, who's like the play by the rules cop, and then
Yeah,
Rig,
she's
who's
like the jigsaw expert, and she's like, we gotta play the game.
yeah, and then Rig, who's basically like forget by the book. We have to
Yeah,
do it our own way.
I'm the cop from the streets. Yeah.
And so with Dina Meyer playing Carrie and Lyric Bent, I feel like they do their job just fine, but
Yeah.
we barely see them in the film to get like a consistent idea. Again, it just they're there to help push the plot along.
Right.
So, but we are leaving our main antagonist, our main dude we have here, Tobin Bell, who plays Jigsaw, and John, who you didn't really get to see too much in the first film.
Yeah.
You just heard his voice there and get to see some flashbacks there, but aside from that, nothing too crazy. But I think, in my opinion, he's probably the best performance in this film. You could just tell he's enjoying
Mm-hmm.
doing this role, just kind of being like the trickster sort of thing
Mm-hmm.
and spouting his philosophy there.
Yeah.
I think he's just enjoyable there, and with the line delivery, he does a good job. And heck, he just is sitting in a chair the entire time, so that's like major kudos to him.
Mhm. Yeah, and he's got a sort of like straight shooting, dry delivery kind of thing, but at the same time, he's definitely also the kind of guy that's sitting behind a little invisible pulpit. He's like he likes to lecture people with his riddles, and this is. Have you ever really lived, detective? And, all that kind of stuff, and he's definitely got that sort of I don't know, I want to say like Joker energy or some shit where he's like, I have to teach everybody a lesson, but he's one of those kind of villains. But it's cool because he's not like all in your face and monologue-y. He's just like this is his philosophy, and he has a really fucked up way of forcing it on people, but he really thinks that he's gonna change some lives or whatever, improve the species.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which that's probably one of my favorite aspects of Saw 2 is that they dive deeper into his backstory and his philosophy
Mm-hmm.
and adding stuff to it on like why he's so dead set on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the first film, you get basically a general idea,
Yeah.
but this dives heavily even deeper, and so he adds like, oh yes, I also had this thing happen to me.
Right.
And he just keeps adding to it there. And I mean, just him talking to Donnie, because again, that's Donnie's game is John just asks him to sit down and have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
And if he manages to do so, his son will be safe there. And Donnie doesn't know whether to believe him or not. He doesn't know what game he's playing at or anything else, but it's interesting, and I feel like that was a good decision in the writing department of how do we tell more about Jigsaw's story,
Right.
like his backstory in a more natural way. And I feel like that's just, again, that was probably one of my favorite moments at rewatching it again, especially is just hearing him. And Tobin Bell just does a good job with his delivery because again, the way he speaks, it's like he's resolute. He doesn't question his own belief in his own philosophy. Like he's pretty much adamant in his belief, and kind of comes at Donnie in a philosophical way. So I feel like that's definitely one of the highlights of the film for me, anyhow.
Right. Yeah. He also does a good job of he's kind of the villain that like is hard to just defeat because not only does he have all these people that he's trapped and you want to save those people, but he's also like doesn't really care about like dying because he's in a situation where he knows he's gonna die, so he's just like, I don't care, man. Like, kill
Yeah.
me. Like you can't like beat information out of me. Like I don't give a fuck. Like I'm sitting in a wheelchair up here. Like you're not gonna scare me with any of this stuff. He's had experiences that have pushed him beyond that, and so now he's just like cool. You either play my game or you don't.
Yeah, and I think that just makes for an interesting kind of antagonist there.
Mm-hmm.
Just it is kind of like the Joker situation there,
Right.
where we've seen like interpretations of the Joker where you know th- they're either super chaotic, crazy, doing stuff, or the ones that are completely resolute in their beliefs and actions there, and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, you could do whatever to me. That's not going to change anything.
Right, yeah, like especially the versions of the Joker that like want Batman to kill them, and that's the whole point, or whatever. It's like it's kind of in that boat where he's like, he's like, sure, you will fail if you kill me, if you beat me up, if you play dirty cop here. So go ahead and do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely. And I mean, and that's the thing, that's been the thread that made me want to continue watching these Saw films, because I just found it so interesting that for, what's considered to be a silly horror film, it actually had really good points to raise up and think about there, because there's not too many films I could think of that have focused specifically on, what life means and how much value is in it there.
Right.
And so I think that, again, it was explored in the first film, and the second film does a really good job again doing that, but they also give the horror fans more of what they wanted, which was traps.
Right.
Which there's definitely a lot more traps, and they're definitely a lot more brutal, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the traps?
God, man, without giving too much away at the start, I mean, there are some that I just couldn't watch while they were going on. You know what I mean? It's just like it's just uncomfortable. Like there's one involving a lot of needles I didn't like at all.
Oh yeah.
There's and then just even the little clues and stuff they give at the beginning, I feel like you can kind of figure out where they're going with some of them. Like the tape that they play at the very beginning, even it kind of lays out the whole escape plan from the start, but they're so uncooperative that they can't really think about it. You know what I mean? They're busy just tearing around this house trying to figure stuff out. It's like, okay, you can kind of see some of the elements that are coming. They kind of lay out a little bit of a game plan for you, but then at the same time, there's always just twists and turns that you can't really anticipate that get you. I feel like this one has more of a M. Night Shyamalan whoa kind of thing towards the end. Like really a couple of those even just like surprise moments of oh, didn't expect this, did you? So I feel like there's a lot more of that than even in the first film, which is cool on a first watching. I'm curious of your thoughts on a second watching now that you kind of know what's coming.
It's very interesting because whenever it comes to twist, I'm sure you've seen a lot of twist in films that either feel genuine, like, oh wow, that's a really good twist, and even like rewatching it still feels solid. Whereas like some twists, it's like may have worked the first time, every other time it just hurts the film on repeat viewings. This, surprisingly, even though I knew the twists that were coming up, it still holds up fairly well. Like whenever it came to it, because I felt like, okay, I know what the twist is, so I don't feel like I'm being like horribly misled, like it's a cheap tactic. I felt like it was pretty still enjoyable and believable, and it didn't really bother me. So that's one of the good merits about this film, is that I feel like the twist don't feel super cheap. Again, it's definitely not as impactful the first time, where I'm like, again, not expecting, I'm like, what did this happen and what this happened, but it was still enjoyable, especially just like watching, because again, towards the end, whenever there's like a huge climactic build and everything, it was like, I'm still enjoying this even though I know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
So, and from my standpoint anyhow, it was still very much enjoyable. What wasn't enjoyable was how they dealt with the traps.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that there's been a whole like video series on YouTube where this guy breaks down how you could escape from every Saw trap or using stuff from the film. It's like a whole series he's done, like I think every film by now. And just some of the ways, again, they go about the traps. It's like, just take a moment and think it. Yeah, which again, you know, I guess like the excuse for some of it is, again, you have like characters that are just quick acting and are just like, no, I gotta get out of here,
Right.
panicking stuff. And again, that's where horror, you've mentioned this before in other films, you start to question how valid their reactions and decisions are
Right.
there. And this one is just like a whole lot of them just flailing their arms around. Because that's the other thing too, like a lot of the traps they find themselves in, it's not like, oh, they start in their own individual traps. It's like they realize somebody's in a trap and don't do anything to help them out, and they could do a billion things to help them out, which that was a lot more sour on the second watch for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Because again, say what you will about the first one and like, oh, why didn't you use the saw to do blah, 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 yada, yada. At least I could like buy why they didn't or couldn't there. This one, I just have a hard time being like, you could have done 50 things to make this less shitty.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. I feel like even just like, I was having that thought whenever the cops in the very beginning like, found the location. Because, like, of all people, like, trained SWAT team officers know how to deal with booby traps. That's, like, part of their job. And they know that whenever you find the location of the famous Jigsaw booby trap man killer, and you find that location because he wrote a clue on a wall and obviously wanted you to find him, that place is going to be loaded with booby traps. And their response to that as trained officers was like, let's just run really fast into it.
Yeah, that was...
booby traps.
I didn't even consider the cops there. Holy smokes. Yeah. So stuff like that, like even watching a second time around, I'm like, I feel like this is just really dumb right now.
Yeah.
Like this isn't like, ooh, gotcha sort of things there. Again, everyone's kind of a meathead in this film.
Yeah, it's a little bit Home Alone-y, where it's just like, whoa, marbles, I'm falling down. There's a hot iron in my face. It's, it's not goofy like that, obviously. But it's at times, it's like, did you really fall for that? Like, what was her name? Autumn, I think. Whatever.
Yeah.
There's a trap she falls into at the end that I won't spoil, but it's essentially like watching a mouse, like eat a cheese trap. Just
Addison falling into that trap. It was
Addison,
it was pretty. It was pretty silly.
Yeah.
Like, needless to say,
it wasn't even like a clever trap. You could obviously see what was going to happen by just looking at it. Like, it was see-through. It really was like watching a mouse fall into a mouse trap and just like, okay, like, you could have seen that one coming, buddy.
Yeah, it's so whenever it comes to aspects of like how they could have avoided it, it's like the equivalent of like, the damsel in distress running away from the slasher and she clearly runs towards the danger as opposed to away. There's a lot more chinks in the armor, whereas opposed to the first one, there was only like a few traps that I felt like, okay, if you just had not done this, the rest are fairly sound or unfair completely.
Yeah, and there's a lot of in this movie too. I feel like there's a little bit of this in the first movie, but in this movie especially, there was a lot of like, wow, you would have had to really guess that they were going to do exactly this, Mr. Jigsaw Man. Like predicting human behavior to like a ridiculous extent where they were like, wow, you had to really guess that they were going to stand right there while they did this action so that their head would explode if they happened to stand anywhere else.
Yes, exactly. Like, you just have to place all bets they're going to be dumb enough to do that. And I don't know, it just raises so many questions with a lot of it. But that being said, it's still enjoyable to see like the creativity of the traps, and this is where Saw kind of became defined for the rest of the series there.
Sure.
As opposed to like the first one where it was like, a flavor spice, they make this spice the whole main meat of the dish, basically. And I will say, kind of similar to the bathroom, I really do like the house aesthetic, just like the worn down, tattered house. Again, it has a vibe to it.
Right, it's like an old abandoned house, and I like how they kind of start in one room, like the bathroom, but then they kind of discover that they can break out fairly quickly, and that there's just like a whole house that they can't get out of. You know what I mean? And that like makes the progression. You don't really feel claustrophobic. Like I felt the first movie did a really good job of cutting away to other scenes and other storylines and stuff, so that bathroom didn't feel too claustrophobic. Like you're just there the whole time. But this one instead of trying to pull out that hat trick twice, was like, yeah, let's just give them other rooms to explore. So that made it interesting and made the like plot progress a little more easier, I feel like, for the writing department, where it's like, okay, well, they can walk into this room and then discover this and
Yeah. And I feel like that's good again to like, because we've talked about whenever it comes to sequels and trying to like move beyond what the original did, I feel like this does a good enough job to where it doesn't depend on the first one too much. It borrows stuff from the first one, but it's like very light stuff, like whether it's like the theme of Saw, sprinkled in there, or if it's like, certain like editing effects there. But
yeah,
I feel like that just ends up kind of being more so the style and vibe of it. So I think it's good that it doesn't rely too heavily to where I'm like, I feel like I'm just watching the first film. So which is good. It's definitely good to like stretch your legs out and kind of explore the universe and ideas. So I think that's one of the major strengths that Saw 2 has.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like the plot and the tensions and everything are way different enough that it's not like you're just watching the first one a second time with new shinier traps or whatever. Which they could have easily done, but so yeah, I agree. But I feel like they did just such a good job of creating a unique style for the Saw universe in the beginning that it's just I don't feel like it feels cheap or anything that they use the same editing effects and music. And I mean, really, the whole movie just feels green slightly for some reason, but that's like just what I expect from Saw now.
Yeah, just like that weird hues and stuff there, which. I don't know. That's the one thing I will say is that the Blu-ray release of like Saw 2, I really hope they do the same treatment as they did with Saw 1 and kind of give like a 4K treatment, because it definitely looked like, from like an editing perspective there, like some shots look fairly like blurry unintentionally there. It's kind of more guerrilla style filmmaking a little bit there, which, I don't know. I would just hope that maybe with a future restoration, so long as they continue it, who knows, that it could look cleaner up. But again, I do like the weird hues.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, in the editing department in this movie, more so than the first one, there were a lot of times where it was like mismanaged, you know what I mean? Like they really shouldn't have been trying to make that shot look as intense as they did, but it's just like, they do the thing where they're like, I'm just gonna shoot a million shots and shake the camera a lot and fast forward it and have pictures of people screaming and like like over and over. And sometimes like there's like, most of the time I felt like they did a good job with that, but there were probably like 3 or 4 times in this movie where it was just kind of laughable, where it was like, that wasn't warranted.
Yeah,
it's just like little Billy skipping down the street with a lollipop and then it like falls on the ground. It's like like 30 minutes of intense like screaming and blood curdling just to show you how traumatic that was for him. And it's like, was it really warranted there?
Yeah, I feel like the editing, like I remember we even made the joke in the first one that they did some editing shots that's like, how much effort did you put into that editing shot? And then of course there'd be kind of like that same similar sort of messy editing style you see in the first film. I feel like the second film has way more of the messy aesthetic editing, which again, whenever it's done well, it's done well. When it's not done well, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I feel like there are just some nights in the old editing bay that whatever one editor that they had just did a little too much horse meth and just went a little crazy with it. But.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good point there. I feel like talking about the editing of Saw is good since it's like very apparent.
Right.
There.
It's a unique style though, and I appreciate it. There's just whenever you have that sort of unique stylistic choice, it's like sometimes you can overuse it and not recognize when, or like something, because I'm sure they shoot a lot of that on set with the intention of like, okay, we're gonna do this crazy editing style here. And then whenever you cut it and you're looking at it, it might be like, well, maybe that's a little much there, but like, what else are we gonna do? We filmed it to be this way, and it looks boring the other way, so I'll just leave it in or whatever. But I felt like there were just a couple shots like that were like, ooh.
Yes.
In retrospect, that didn't play out probably the way you wanted it to. But overall, I do feel like the editing was good, and it's always fun to watch a Saw movie.
Yeah, it was good. It's good stuff. Any other points you want to hit on before jumping to spoilers? Good, bad, ugly, whatever.
Man, I don't think so. Yeah.
Did you already kind of give the audience a general consensus on what you think? And Aaron,
Yeah.
please, without further ado, give your rating for Saw 2.
I give it a 2. I'm just kidding. 2 times 3. I give it a 6. It's a good movie. It's above average. It's always fun. I love seeing what Saw does uniquely. And if you're in it for torture porn, then, I mean, it's hard to get much better. But I will say, yeah, it's overall for like an average viewer, probably a little above the gross threshold, an intense threshold. Some of the traps and stuff that we'll go into spoilers were just, really skin crawling kind of stuff. Intentionally very uncomfortable from start to finish. But overall, I mean, I feel like they did a good job with the story. I do feel like the movie almost tries to lift up the main villain a little too much and tear down the protagonist a little too much, because like really like the main character's kind of a dickhole, so it's hard to really root for him, especially as you go on through the story and learn just how much of an asshole he is. But it's still interesting. It's a good I feel like the plot's nice. I feel like the puzzles are generally pretty cool. Again, we talked about how sometimes it's hard to suspend that disbelief for too long, because it's like, really, you could have just done that? I mean, you didn't think about that in like the 30 seconds you were burning alive or whatever. Like,
oh my gosh,
but overall, I felt like it was an enjoyable experience, and definitely a unique one. Of all the horror movies we watched and of other non-horror movies I'm aware of, nobody's quite done this kind of movie like Saw does. So you got to give it some props for that. So it's a solid 6 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, well, that is definitely more generous than what I was expecting there, because for me, whereas watching the first film, I feel like there's just so much I can appreciate about the style and art of the first one. This second time round, it went down just a fraction of a bit there. I just felt like, and again, it's not because I knew just because of the twist there, it's just a lot more of the flaws. It wasn't like one of those things that I'm like, well, I could look past it because of this. And I found myself kind of dozing out of being invested there a little bit. And there'd be moments where it really reeled me in, whether it's like, John talking about like his origin, even more so as to why he's doing what he's doing and why he believes what he does. And again, like as much as like this traps, some of them made my skin crawl there. I can't appreciate that. What I can't appreciate is how like dumb the individuals are, which again, it's just kind of like that weird thing there where it's like, yes, I could believe this could happen in a situation. I mean, humans prove time and time again to be really stupid, so there's definitely enough situations, but rewatching it there, it was just like, oh, come on. This is not going by any easier. So I'm pretty close with your rating there. I think it's good to warn viewers that, as opposed to the first one of like, yeah, still give it a watch, this one definitely will make your skin crawl definitely a lot more. But I'd probably give it a either generous 6 or like 5.75. That's probably where I put it at realistically. I enjoy it still. I mean, it's definitely, without spoiling anything, one of the films I enjoyed more as a whole there, and I could appreciate a lot of the new stuff it brings. But I don't know, in contrast to that, it's weird because again, I highly value it as like, this is what Saw is all about. This is like, this is what has come to fruition. Kind of like, Evil Dead 2 finding its voice there. Kind of like that idea. It's just, I don't know, especially compared to the first one there, I just didn't quite enjoy it as much. But again, it still has a lot of merits to it, and I could still easily see myself rewatching it in the future. It's not like one of those, because I didn't enjoy it the second time round, I'm like, that's it, I'm done. But it was hindered just a tiny bit, especially whenever the flaws stick out even more so the second time round.
Sure.
But yeah, so still solid recommendation overall. And so if you're curious about watching it, definitely seek it out and give it a look-see. And without a further ado-zy, how about we talk about spoilery no rubesy? I don't know.
Okay. Spoiler time.
Woohoo!
Man, I feel like when you have a movie that has just like M. Night Shyamalan twists, you gotta just get them out of the way so you can talk about the rest.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
So, I mean, the game that Jigsaw wanted to play, he was telling the truth. If he had just waited for 2 hours and talked with him, then his son would be safe and sound. Oh, get what he did there? Because his son was in a safe in the room that they decided to not investigate for some reason.
Yeah.
They had like 10 cops there, wandering around this little attic, looking at these little monitors. None of them could figure out that you could just walk over to this safe that's suspiciously sitting right there, and that's probably yelling the whole time, because he started yelling as soon as the safe opened. He was like, I don't know. You didn't think to look there? You didn't think to look in the secured safe for some evidence or something?
Yeah, the smarts in the cops' head is not the sharpest.
Right.
Definitely not the sharpest, but it does make it all the funnier, because again, like his first line whenever good old Donnie is interrogating him, so he's like, "Where's my son?" Tobin gives that great delivery of, "He's in a safe place."
Yeah.
And it just gets funnier every single time. And I feel like because John Kramer as a character was genuinely telling the truth there, it kind of heightens his character a bit, because again, it's like, you don't know whether he's telling the truth or not there. But again, the whole idea is that you can't escape the trap as long as you follow the rules.
Right. And all the rules were for his game was to listen. You know what I mean? So if you just listen to him say, "Your son is in a safe place," oh, point, wink, wink, then, maybe they would have found him.
Yeah.
That's not the first blunder from those cops, and it's not the last either.
Definitely not. But I feel like, again, just having that, I feel like that's definitely a lot more powerful of a, I feel like it's definitely just like I feel like that's a good genuine twist, because even though I knew he was in the safe there, I assumed that he was still unconscious and they had like the oxygen mask on him so that way he could breathe, and he just woke up as soon as the door opened. That was what I thought anyhow.
Or that it was soundproof.
Yes, yeah, one of those two things anyhow. But I mean, I feel like that's a good twist there, because again, I feel like it just kind of, again, in a way reveals that, again, Donnie's character, Eric Matthews, is a very flawed individual there who just chooses to fail. And again, I just feel like Tobin has the best lines in the whole film as Jigsaw. I feel like the writers just have a lot of fun writing for him, because whenever Eric Matthews decides like he's losing his mind, especially once they realize that the thing they have in common is that every individual was wrongly arrested by Eric Matthews. And whenever he starts getting violent and just beating him up, that the one thing that John tells him is game over. And again, you don't think anything about it there. You just think, again, he's just like, okay, game's over. I'll show you where he's at. And so I'm kind of glad they did that, because again, it's kind of like the whole philosophy they put behind of like, oh, is the Jigsaw killer really killing people there? Because technically they're killing themselves, sort of
Oh.
that aspect there. And so
Mm-hmm.
because he failed a test, he's like, okay, I'll take you there.
Right.
And then it's like a huge trap as he finds out.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like that's a pretty good twist. And also whenever it comes to like the cam footage actually being a recording.
That one pissed me off a little bit.
Please do
Not like
tell.
too bad. Like I thought it was like, oh, clever Jigsaw, but like in order for him to be clever Jigsaw, first off, for some reason they had to have the tech team, quote unquote, come in to like trace the thing, and it took them an hour and a half to get there.
Yeah.
Like a hell of a response time, officers. When you didn't think to bring in the tech team at the start for whenever you're raiding this apparently puzzle guy super genius thing, whatever, tech team finally gets there. They don't think to like see that these wires are connected to this safe, you know what I mean? Like, oh man, it seems like something happens to this safe when when the timer hits 0. Oh well, but they can manage to trace a video to this address. They're like, oh, let me trace signal for this. Like, they never really explain that. They trace the signal, and they're like, oh, it's this address. Go, go, go. And they drive there, and then they only discover, because they press play on a VCR, that is like, they were tapes all along.
That's
Great job, tech team.
That's an interesting aspect. Like, and that not only applies to the cops, but for the survivors of the game, is the only way the film progresses as the story needs it to is for the characters to be incompetent or like pushy and rushy. That's the only way this story they want to tell works, which again, it's like, you could believe more so the survivors would be hasty, but cops who are dealt to deal with this situation that are just being super eluded by Jigsaw, I could definitely see why you have a lot of issues there of like they weren't able to tell that it was playback footage soon.
And I'm completely just dismissing the fact that, like, I feel like even given the fact that this guy kidnapped some people, real cops, like, aren't they not supposed to negotiate with terrorists? Aren't you not supposed to play the game? I feel like they'd be like, where is he? And they'd be like, you have to play my game. And they'd just punch him in the face and put him some handcuffs and drag him off. You know what I mean? They'd be like, all right, well, fuck you. All right, just see what's around here. Like, this guy's obviously not an accurate source of information, and we know that he murders people all the time. Why are we gonna sit here and let him play this game and then let this one rogue cop carry him off and let him escape and everything? It's like, you guys just keep falling into this guy's traps.
Yeah.
When he's obviously armed and dangerous. He, like, killed 2 cops when they were walking in from booby traps. Like, last time I checked, whenever you get a no-knock warrant on some guy's creepy old house, you just blast him, apparently. Like, I guess it's because he's white that they don't just shoot him.
Oh my god. Yeah, the interpretation I got from the film is because Eric Matthews' son is involved, and again, whenever you have to think as a father figure versus a figure of the law, you'll act different there, and you're more willing to put up with BS. But I do get it.
Right.
Again, like, why are they continually allowing him? I guess
I'm willing to, like, put that past, especially since his character is, like, one that doesn't necessarily play by the rules, you know what I mean? So he'd probably be like, fuck the rules, let's play this stupid game to get my son freed or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was willing to let it slide, but I did just want to point it out to be like, that's not, like, cops wouldn't do that either.
Yeah, it's definitely a little silly whenever you think about that, but it does allow for like a lot of good moments there, especially with whenever John is talking to Eric, and he's kind of like bringing up sore spots and the fact that he basically tells Eric he knows he shot unarmed victims there, and he's planted evidence to get a conviction there, which again kind of give hints as to like he's not really a good cop, like at all whatsoever, both like on a moral level and on an actual being a good cop, you know.
Being an effective police officer, which is double shown by the fact that I guess none of them there are that effective, because there's like a big plot twist in the middle where they're like, when that part's revealed where he's like, actually everybody in this room is somebody you've arrested and you didn't recognize, and it's like the way they find that out is he asks them to open a drawer that's under the monitors, and open a file folder. Like, you guys didn't check the drawers before? What kind of fucking cops are you? How do we solve this? And like we see them like doing all kinds of shit, like, oh, maybe if we tear down his work, or maybe like you guys didn't think to open the drawers. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's definitely a little silly in the fact that they're not good at their job.
No.
Yeah, and it's pretty much there only to make the story work. So
Right.
that's definitely some points knocked off there. One thing I will say that you talked about like how knowing the twist affected the film there. I was thinking about that because the whole idea is that they kind of trick the audience into thinking that the game that all of the survivors are in versus the time that Eric Matthews is interrogating Jigsaw is going on at the same time, and they even kind of edit it in a similar fashion there,
Right.
especially whenever it gets towards the end of the film and Eric Matthews beats up Jigsaw and Jigsaw's like, yeah, I'll take you to the house, and he drags him there, and so you're thinking it's going on at the same time. I didn't know if you knew that none of this was going on at the same time.
No, I didn't figure it out till they got to the house and pressed stop or whatever. I was like, something's happening, but I didn't figure out that it wasn't going on at the same time because I think I was just trusting the Hollywood editing gods, because I was like, these things must be happening at the same time because they keep on showing them to me at the same time.
Yeah, and so it's a question of whether it feels like a cheap trick or genuine good editing, and whenever it came to watching it, I concluded that I didn't find it to be too terribly cheap because the editing still felt good and natural there, even after they because I think they even like show it like this is recorded footage and they're still showing that chase scene go on there. I still felt like it was just good editing, and just thinking about it, I'm like, that's a good artistic choice there.
I thought it was fair because it's kind of from the like main cop guy's point of view, and so it's like he thinks that this is happening because they're watching it all happen on the cameras or whatever, and then it like shows you what's happening on the cameras. So I didn't think it was that cheap because like as far as they know, it's happening all at the same time. So like as far as the audience would know too, then
Yeah, and so I felt like overall that was a pretty good chase scene, and I do want to talk about like the ending more, but I also feel like we should talk about some of the earlier incidents.
yeah, for sure.
There. Actually, you know what? Yeah, you retcon that because I feel like we need to get the final twist out of the way in order to analyze working backwards there almost.
That Amanda was in cahoots the whole time?
Yes, yes, like that big twist, because once Eric enters the original bathroom that the first film took place in, which I thought was a nifty callback.
Sure.
It makes sense that they would try to do the same, location wise there. So I thought it was a nifty callback there. But whenever he enters the bathroom and just realizes that his son isn't there, and not only that, but we get introduced to the pig outfit again. I'm sure you weren't expecting that, or did you remember it from the first film?
Yeah. I forgot exactly what the purpose was in the first film, but I was like, oh, the pig in the bath?
Yeah, because like all you know is in the first film you see someone in a pig outfit in the robe, which is never explained who they are, is the one to kidnapped Detective Gordon, good lord, Dr. Gordon and Adam. That individual was the one, and so you're never sure if it's Jigsaw or not. You assume it probably is there, or probably not. It's just never questioned.
Right.
But it's revealed that it's actually Amanda. And I didn't know how you felt about Amanda being in cahoots with Jigsaw the entire time.
It's definitely one of those things that I wonder what I'll think about it if I watch this movie again, knowing that fact. But I thought it was a more believable way to, like, have the ending that they had, where you make sure that the kid is alive, because she was kind of protecting him somewhat, you know what I mean? Because they needed that kid to be alive in order for it to all happen. But at the same time, it was like, besides that, did she need to be there? Or like, would she be killing off everybody if they weren't just killing themselves? Like, what? Like, why does she need to be there? Because the way that it had to end in order for Jigsaw's little puzzle to work is that they all die except for the kid and Amanda. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me because for me, I think Amanda, what they do with her, like since she is one of the few survivors of the jigsaw traps that she was placed in, that, and again, you hear in the first film is like, no, Jigsaw saved my life. You know, I was basically going down a bad path, and he just made me realize I was going down a bad path. But again, it's revealed later on that, you know, she was caught slitting herself there. And, you know, that's whenever Jigsaw once again confronts her. And, you know, without us knowing as the audience, is basically converting her to be like, you need to help, you know.
Right.
You know, you need to give your life purpose. You need to show other people what their purpose is.
And so at the end, she reveals to Detective Man when he falls for the trap and is in the bathroom or whatever, that, you know, she'll be taking over for Jigsaw's job. She's got the new job, baby, when he dies.
Which I it's hard to like quantify. Whenever it comes to the character itself, I think it's a great idea. I think it totally makes sense that John, who has cancer, he's not going to live long, has this grand realization after he tried to take his own life, and he managed to survive his suicide attempt there, despite actually being like dying from the cancer, that he's like, no, this is a philosophy that needs to take place there, and I could spread my belief to others who believe in the same cause, so that way people can continue to value their life. Because again, in his mind, he's doing justice there. And so I feel like idea wise there, I think Amanda's cool as a character. I feel like Shawnee Smith does a good job playing her there.
Yeah.
But whenever it comes to, again, the schematics of breaking it down about, I believe that she's there in the trap just to ensure that, okay, we don't want to hurt the kid there. We need to set this as an example and trick the policeman into thinking that it's all being recorded on footage there. And so her whole thing is like, I will try to protect it at all costs there. But there's a lot of instances where it could have gone wrong, especially with Xavier going bananas.
Yeah, just killing people when he could just look at the back of their necks. Or
Yeah.
tell people, hey, we could all get out because the combination of the safe is on the back of all of our necks.
Yeah.
I don't know what we haven't figured that out before, because in that very first tape, he's like, the way to get out is on the back of your mind. Oh.
Yeah, that was a big slap. Like that sticks out even more like a sore thumb, which again, it was just kind of like, just check the back.
Right. Well, I thought it was going to be more gruesome, actually, that like the combination of the safe was somehow like on the, like in the back of people's brains, like,
or
literally.
like their skull.
Yeah, and that they would only discover that because that first guy that had his brain blown out, you know, like they thought they were going to be like, oh, there's a piece of the combination here, I have to kill everybody else to get theirs out or whatever. But no, it was literally just written like with a marker on the back of their neck.
It's just, whenever you realize the twist, it does get very frustrating of like, so nobody knew about the numbers on the back of the neck. Like
nobody noticed somebody else's number. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if it was like in the back of their mind and they noticed it like on a skull fragment, because whenever the dude gets his brains blown out there, maybe like Xavier finds it and he's like, oh, I need to cut open people's heads. And again, he's coming at people with a knife.
Right.
Because it just adds to moments where it's like, why is it like this?
Why is he attacking people when I know he's a selfish asshole that just wants to get out for himself, but he could just be like, turn around, okay, cool, and then not tell them or whatever.
Well, and I think that's the reason why it bothers me as a character. It's not the fact, because I like characters that are like assholes just fine or whatever, but this is the part where it's just like, he talks to Jonas holding a knife out saying, turn around, like,
right. It doesn't explain anything. It's just like, turn around, I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Yeah,
like,
and you know, Jonas, who's also been in prison, he's like, no, I'm not turning around with you wielding a knife, having a bewildered look in your eye.
Right.
I just feel like, again, and it's just kind of frustrating because I feel like Amanda is almost there as a referee to ensure that the traps go as intended there for the most part.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's about my only guess as to why she's there. But
I
feel like it's also kind of a trick of the audience. Like,
right. She's even the one that's like, they get the key and it says, don't use this on the door. And she's like, don't do that. She's like telling them not to fall for the traps, and then they fall for the traps. You know what I mean?
Which, I feel like it also just makes her character believable there, because obviously she knew
Right.
what it was, but she went about it in a believable way while
Sure.
also trying to, again, which I feel like her inclusion as a character definitely helped the story out a bit there, in a sense of like, again, having somebody who had survived the game previously and also has insider knowledge on everything to kind of explain even more what to do there. And again, as she focuses solely on protecting a kid because she knows the kid is like pretty much needs to stay alive.
Yeah.
There in order for like Jigsaw's plan to work out for Eric Matthews there. So I wasn't bothered by her inclusion there, but it is definitely kind of a little bit screwy whenever it comes to that. And so whenever she pretty much injects Eric Matthews with that syringe at the end of the movie there, I did think it was a nifty twist there, kind of just him realizing, oh, I messed up majorly. Like, I've been tricked, because again, he's also shackled to the bathroom wall, and then there's like the huge kind of like, like cutbacks to like all the pieces adding up together, which I felt like was a little bit more messily done as opposed to the first film, which I felt like it was more concise with the cutbacks it did.
Yeah.
This was like information overload
A little bit.
there. So it definitely was a little bit messier of an ending. And, they try to recreate a little bit of the ending there, because she's standing in the door frame there and she says game over, which first time watching it I'm like, okay, that's cool. Second time I'm like, I don't know, I just don't get the same shivers as I do in the first film. But I mean, as written, I feel like I understand why they ended it that way there, just to kind of mimic the first one again. So I feel like overall it's fine written out wise there. It just doesn't give me the same chills there. But it does make it kind of weird thinking about it, because again, it's like trying to figure out timeline wise, which that'll be a thing as you figure out with like future Saw films, is figuring out the timeline of what happened. Because again, whenever Eric Matthews presses play on the little recorder, it's Amanda's voice talking and saying like, you arrested me for possession even though I didn't have anything on me. You changed my life that day, but my life got changed a second time there. And so I'm guessing like maybe it's like whenever she was a junkie and she didn't actually have drugs and yet was thrown in prison, that was the first time. And then second time after escaping the Saw trap and quitting drugs, because we're established she stopped doing drugs in the first film after surviving the trap, but instead kind of changed it out for basically slitting her wrist.
I didn't quite understand that part, because they kind of reveal that like that's Amanda in the house talking to the other survivors, quote unquote. That she's like, yeah, but then I didn't appreciate my life or whatever, right? But they go back to that exact scene later when it's revealed she's in cahoots with him, and she's like, I found a father figure, and it's the same scene where she's cutting her wrist, but he's in the corner, like John's in the corner there while she's doing it. So like, is she just trying to kill herself in front of this dude? Or is that like her initiation into becoming him or whatever? Like, because he tried to kill himself and then he became this guy? Is like, he like, all right, now you have to try to kill yourself so that you know what it's like to be on the edge of death or something? I don't know.
It was weirdly edited. Like, I understand why they added that scene, but they edited it in such a weird way. I could definitely tell you it was not an initiation sort of thing there. It's another problem she has there with like, and it doesn't explain it well in the film there, but basically she just was still very depressed there, and I can believe that, especially people who were addicted to drugs and stuff, again, to kind of take away the pain, and even though you don't do drugs anymore, the pain can still be there, and so you have to find a new way to do it. And so the way I interpret it is the fact that she went from drugs to basically self harm to herself there, and I wish they would have edited this differently. It would have made it so much cleaner, but like maybe just like have a reveal like where she's doing that there and someone knocks at the door And then, she opens the door and then sees Jigsaw, and she's like, oh my gosh, there. And so then he sees it, and he's like, I'm going to, you know, show you true purpose, give you a purpose by becoming my squire, my follower, my aide, my assistant.
Right.
I wish they just would have edited that to where it was a lot more clear to the audience there, because, I mean, by the time they reveal it, they're already revealing that she was working with Jigsaw the entire time there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just like, because I feel like, if I remember this correctly, they were showing like a whole thing about like, why are you here again? And she's like, I was harming myself there.
Yeah.
And I wish they just would have edited that scene differently, as opposed to John just being in a corner, because John would have not been okay with her slitting her wrist multiple times, because he's all about you value life. So I wish they would have edited that differently, and especially with how much they love speeding up footage, they could have done something like that. Just show her like answering the door.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't expecting anybody, and then he sees the blood dripping, whatever sort of thing. Or he even like walks in or something, because obviously he knows how to work devices and stuff. But that's besides the point. I definitely agree with you. It should have been a lot more cleaner, and that's kind of like this film's issues. It has a lot of good ideas, just more of a messy execution.
Yeah, at times, yeah, for sure.
Speaking of messy, we should also probably talk about some of the traps there.
Yeah.
Starting with the very first one, which is supposed to be like the first victim that leads Eric Matthews to Jigsaw there. Overall, what did you think about the death mask?
Yeah, I think if I was in that situation where I woke up with a death mask on and like you play the little tape and it's like there's a key behind your eyeball, start scalpeling it out, I'd just be like, no, I think I'd rather die. I just kind of sit down and wait for that puppy to go off. But yeah, or like look around. He had like a mirror that he could look on a metal stand. I would probably try to like at least wedge that in there and see if I could keep it from closing on me, snapping.
Yeah, a lot of people have pointed out that flaw, which again kind of happens whenever they start creating even more and more traps, that they're just like, there is clearly an easy way to do this, because even like whenever he's trying to pull, he like yanks his head to start the timer.
Yeah, like I think I would have noticed that there's a cable tied to this, because he kind of wakes up and he moves and he doesn't quite start it, but he only starts it like at the end when he like yanks it. Yeah, I don't think if I was in that situation I would have actually ever started the timer. I guess I'll sit here.
Yeah, I like, especially whenever it comes to the eyeball, it's like I get like grossed out with stuff like that. There,
like I'm not gonna carve out my own eye.
And so the fact that he fails the test is understandable there in that aspect, that he's like, man, I can't do it.
Right.
Just doing that there. So I don't feel like it's any fault of the person aside from starting the trap. I would have definitely be like, okay, there's a cable. There's a reason there's a cable there, and I would at least try to like reach for something there. I don't know. That's what I would do anyhow. I feel like the cable use, as we've seen multiple times, like it was even used in Amanda's trap. I felt like, again, it made sense for her, because she's like, I can literally not do anything in this position until I move and get up. But other times, especially whenever it came to the door, a lot of the doors,
the door traps are stupid.
Yeah, definitely stupid. But overall, I felt like, the death mask was a fair trap. For the most part. I mean, I say fair, it's technically fair if you don't mind digging behind your eyeball. It just sucks.
I don't know how many people that would have the resolve to do that. And so I guess that's his point, is he's thinning out people that don't do that. But don't count me out.
No, I don't blame you. And again, I think Jigsaw even knew that he wouldn't have the cojones to solve the trap.
But then Jigsaw has the fucking nerve to be like, I didn't kill anybody. I just put a giant fucking bear trap on their head that closes. I gave them a choice. I didn't rob the bank. I just put a gun to the teller's head and said, give me all your money. And she gave it to me, so
it's not
she
robbing.
had a choice. She could have said no. What an idiot, Fuck you, Jigsaw. He thinks he's so smart, and the movie's like set up to... No, you fucking murder people all day.
Oh my god, I'm going to give myself hiccups. I'm laughing. Oh my gosh. Okay, I've caught my breath. That was a really good analogy. That was really good. That's the one thing that bothers me is just like, I mean, I believe that he believes that there,
Right,
but
right.
when it comes to real world stuff, it, you can break it down and, I guess that's the whole idea about it. But besides the point, yes, I totally agree. He is murdering these people. Yes. Absolutely. I don't think that I'm like, because I love Jigsaw, I'm like, no, he's not murdering them.
Oh, no. He gave them a choice.
Yes, he gave them a choice.
He could dig behind his eyeball and get a key.
Yeah, it's very hard solutions.
Right.
Hard solutions to play it as is. But yeah, definitely if you are able to stop the spring load thing, especially with like the scalpel or something like that, wedge it in there just to stop it from springing shut.
Yeah.
Definitely would have been a lot easier. But yeah, so that was the first trap there, and then moving on to the second trap with the gun door, which again,
well, it was dumb.
Yeah, it was pretty dumb there. I get the reason why it's there because again, it's just like it establishes rules like don't open the door. Yeah. And it gives him a key, and Xavier's like a meathead. He's like, I'm done with this,
right.
Moving forward. And then you have that guy who's just panicking, who happens to look through the eye hole as soon as the trigger is pulled. It's just like a Looney Tunes sort of death.
It's like he wasn't even the one opening the door, which is why that one bothers me, because if it was just Xavier and not the other dude looking through the eye hole, that bullet would have whiffed, and they would have been like, oh, shit. That was scary, but
we made it out.
Let's just walk out.
and the door even opens on its own.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd think it wouldn't open if that was the point, but I guess he actually did want them to go through, which then that puzzle doesn't make any sense, because it establishes, yes, you can break the rules, because sometimes it just works out. And
I don't know. Like, I guess it's like the rule of if they had just waited, the door would have opened without pulling the trigger.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, like the keyhole was just there just to trigger the trap. But yeah, it's definitely a bit of a silly death there, but as for traps, it's fine. Right. Just kind of silly. It pretty much requires them to stand right in this position, as you mentioned previously. And then we move later on with the trap, and this is one that really bothered me, both on a like, ooh, that's really painful sort of sense, but also this is really dumb on all fronts, and that's the furnace trap. I feel like the furnace is iconic, but also really stupid.
Yeah, because like, wasn't there pretty obviously two doors on the furnace? Like,
yeah, so there's like a glass door on one edge, right, and then there's a front door on the other.
So wouldn't you rather try to reach through the glass door than crawl into the furnace?
Yeah, they just didn't think about it, and again, like, I will say, I do appreciate what they did with like Abby's character and kind of being like, wait, I knew I recognized you. You're the guy who that kidnapped us there. And again, I do like how Jigsaw is like kind of using these criminals to fulfill his acts and being like, okay, thank you, but you're also going in a trap.
Yeah.
There, I feel like that's just a good way for him to get stuff done.
Sure.
While also fulfilling his purpose. And I will say, it's just so I'm like sweating whenever I'm like bothered. I just go like, but like Xavier once again is just like, dude, you better go in there or else I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah,
doing that, and he's like, yeah, go ahead, kill me. Like, right. what difference does it make there? And so then Xavier's like, oh yeah, you're right. There, and so then I'm surprised Abby does decide. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna go in there, but I'm sure it's just so he can get himself an antidote.
Right
there, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll grab another antidote. Why not? Because I just want to get out of here.
Again, nobody listens to the instructions, I guess, because they were like, you get one for yourself and then one at a cost. Ha ha ha. You are in the furnace. Ha ha ha. What do you think's going to happen? Ha ha ha. Don't check if the door just closes on you or anything. Don't check if it's hooked up to gas. So what could the cost be? Ha ha ha. It's so dumb.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the dumbest things there. But I mean, at the least, I can understand why he would maybe pull it. But it is, And again, that's like kind of like one of the interesting things is like with Amanda's character, she's there to sometimes say, don't do this, or she's either there to be like, yeah, I want to make sure these traps go through. So it's very weird on how selective she is there. But again, I'm sure like in her instance, she can't have them purposely misled to kill themselves,
Right.
but at the same point, she can't help them out to where they're avoiding the traps there. So
Sure.
I feel like she does a believable job at trying to establish the rules for them even further there. And again, it is kind of like a nifty twist for the audience that, oh, she was actually in on it the whole time.
Right.
But yeah, it was just frustrating because he goes in, he's climbing in, whatever, one syringe, not bad, pulls the other one, locks it shut, and then the fire starts going off, and then obviously he's panicking there. Nobody does anything for the first minute or two. They're just like,
Right.
what's going on? What's going on?
And it's not like he's even like burning to death at that point. It's like the first row of flames comes on, and then the second row of flames.
Yes, it was very much a slow thing, and so you have these survivors that are clearly like, oh no, they're surrounded in an area. Find something,
Right.
anything, and it isn't until like way too late, way too late to when they're like, oh yeah, the spiked bat we found, we could just bash the glass in.
Right.
It's frustrating, and so it just
Which seems like an immediate reaction you'd have, and then like I can understand that they didn't think to like let's turn off the gas or cut the hose that's connected to this gas furnace.
Well,
or,
I can actually explain the gas thing, unfortunately.
Okay.
So, Abi, whenever he's like listening to the tape, he's looking at the furnace there. He's twisting a knob. The knob falls off and he tosses it.
Oh.
It's such a quick cutaway as to why they couldn't turn off the gas on the outside.
That makes sense.
It's dumb.
That is dumb. I feel like that would have been more effective if they just saved that for not Abi to do. If he was just like, I need to get in there and it turns on, and then like the kid or something is like, oh, I need quick thinking, tries to turn off the gas and it breaks off, and he's like, oh fuck.
Yeah, that would have been so much better.
Right.
That would have been so much better because spend that time having them figure out how to get him out. Because they clearly didn't want him to die.
Right.
They wanted him to get out, but they were just so incompetent there. And so that's like one of the traps that I think the trap is cool. I think how people reacted to the trap is really infuriating.
Yeah.
And I think that hindered my enjoyment there because again, it's like first time watching it, you're like, what are these people going to do? And then in my head watching it a second time, I'm like, okay, I know Abi doesn't live there. Like, let me reevaluate what they're doing to try to help. And it's
Right.
And even then, there's like a whole thing inside the furnace, and it says twist with a devil pointing to it, and it never shows Abi trying to twist it.
Right, because I think he doesn't notice it until like the fire's already too much, and he doesn't want to try to crawl through it to twist it. But
like burn it. But even at that point, like, wouldn't you? And again, I guess it just comes down to the characters.
Yeah.
Like the eyeball thing. But I figure if I'm already trapped in a fire. I might as well go for at least the twisty thing. But again, it kind of comes down to what are you going to do in a moment of distress like that. So it's hard to evaluate there because I know there's a lot of like, people are like, oh yeah, I would totally rip my eyeball out to grab the key, or I would totally jump into like a fiery pit there in order to, it's easy to say that whenever you're not in the situation there, but it does make it tricky on like, okay, just do this. Again, like their decision making is questionable. But again, not even more so for Abi's sake, but just for the other gang members' decisions there. And so, of course, by the time they bust the glass out, Abi can't get out and then he just dies there. And I do like that they don't even get a syringe because
it burns up in there.
Yeah, I do like that twist at the very least there. And so it just pretty much all became for naught there. So overall, while I do have my issues with the trap, I do think the trap itself is cool. It's just how it went about. It's just that. And then the next trap is the trap that I remember from the film.
Is that the syringe one?
Yes, it's the syringe. Oh, let me tell you, I felt queasy. Like, the eyeball thing was one thing, the needles is like a whole other thing there. It's just like,
whole like bathtub, like larger than a bathtub, like a small jacuzzi tub full of like used dirty needles.
Ugh, it's so awful and terrible. And again, it just Xavier, because this is pretty much a trap meant for Xavier.
Right.
There for the most part, Abby's was like related to the fire trap there, and so a lot of these people are doing their own traps coincidentally there. Xavier has one where, again, you have the door which doesn't open, and again, Amanda has the liberty of saying, if the door's hard to open, it's probably a trap, and Xavier's like,
Right.
like Gmod flailing into the door there, and it's just like, my thing is like, couldn't you like have thought like maybe to have somebody like skinny slip through? Because again, you have like the kid or Amanda who's skinny, maybe I don't know, them be like, hey, why don't you wedge your way through this door while I hold it open if it's clearly spring loaded or whatever.
Or even before, he was like so intent on just like tearing down the house with this like club that they find that's full of nails and stuff. Why wouldn't you just go through the drywall? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another thing, because that was his whole thing. He's like, this whole house is drywall. I could break through it. And, there is some exits that shows that it's clearly like rebar enforced there that they can't break through.
But like
they didn't even try. They didn't even try to do that.
Wouldn't you, if you saw that the first door that you tried to force open killed somebody, wouldn't you be like, all right, maybe we just bust down the wall? Like, surely he doesn't have traps in the walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was just frustrating. And so, again, I feel like whenever it comes to the trap itself, yes, it's like a really good idea on a horror aspect wise. Like, even though I don't enjoy watching it, it's like kind of the equivalent of like, well, it's doing a good job just coming up with like a really horrific trap.
Yeah, that I'll give a gold star for that. It was truly horrific. But yeah, like dropping somebody into that tub of needles,
it's just,
and then having them have to fish around to find the correct one or whatever. That was so bugged.
Yeah, it was. And again, because the whole idea is that this is supposed to be Xavier, and Xavier just is like, no, you're going to solve it. And again, just without warning, just shoves it in. Like, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, and
there?
Of course,
But again,
had to be barefoot too. That detail was just like, oh Jesus.
Yeah, and just thrown in, and it's just like the more you think about it, the more like horrific it gets there. Which, I mean, it shows it's doing a good job there, like delivering like a big sense of the torture porn horror thing there. But I don't know, again, character decision wise, it's just infuriating, which I guess that's his character, so I guess that makes sense. But it's just, I don't know, it definitely hinders my enjoyment of like, it's not even love to hate. I'm just like, dude, this dude's awful. But yeah, it does make it horrific because Amanda is just clearly in pain, getting stabbed by all these needles there, and then she's like, well, and that's the thing that makes it kind of curious, is the fact that Amanda chooses to also help look for the key still, which I guess like maybe
she's like, well, I'm fucking in here, I guess I will, but I don't know.
Yeah, because like I guess like if I don't, then it makes me look bad or whatever, or maybe they won't help me out.
Yeah, or maybe he would kill me or something,
Yeah, and so, yeah, especially that part whenever she just, like, loses it and is like, forget this, and she just starts shoveling the syringes, trying to look around for stuff. And again, the timer is just so unforgiving there, especially because they're, like, looking around at first, and he wastes, like, the first 2 minutes there.
Right.
Yeah, and so I do love that they have him fumble the key whenever he's trying to put it in there. It's just kind of insult to injury there.
Right. He was almost there. But...
Yeah, and then there's like the whole scene of like, the kid helping Amanda out of the pit there, and then like pulling out the syringes one by one. It was definitely horrific, to say the least. So I feel like it is a good horror scene there, even if it like bothers me.
Yeah,
it's just like that weird, it's like the weird threshold of I don't enjoy watching it, but I feel like it's good. Yeah. But then I guess one of the other deaths that happen is from the gas itself, because the gas is seeping in, and it surprisingly takes the life of Laura there, who just like suddenly just starts like foaming at the mouth there and is dead, which that was kind of surprising. The first time I watched it, I wasn't expecting it, because everyone's like slowly being affected, but I guess it's just their own constitution as to...
Right, and I kind of liked that to show that the nerve gas wasn't a bluff or whatever, even though they were already showing people bleeding from their noses and stuff, but it wasn't just like sort of all of a sudden either. 'Cause she was looking, she looked pretty bad for most of the time, and then was like at the end there, the kid had to like carry her around. So it was, yeah, I mean, I think that was a non-cheap way to kill somebody, but
Yeah, yeah. But it is also kind of frustrating, I guess, that the way some of the characters die is because of just Xavier. Xavier is like the sole reason for the most part why a lot of people
fail.
fail. And so it's like whenever Jonas is killed by him, because again, he won't turn his back on him while he's wielding a knife.
Right.
There, because that's whenever Frankie kind of realizes after looking at the dead body of the guy who's, I think his name is Gus. We didn't even talk about him because he's only there for like a few.
Yeah. He's there for like a minute and then dies.
Yeah.
Just looks like a sweaty businessman.
Yes, absolutely. And so just sees that and he's like, oh, I need to look at everyone's necks. Let me do this in an irrational way that they're scared of me.
Right.
I don't know. It just gets a little ridiculous there. And continuing on, I guess the other trap we have to talk about is Addison's trap, which we talked about. This is the most highly critiqued trap in the entire film. I would argue because they said this could have easily been avoided.
Yeah.
Like, say what you will about like the gas chamber, say what you will about other stuff. This is one where it's like, okay, like especially whenever she sticks one hand in
and she notices, you should figure out after one hand that it's a Chinese finger trap that's gonna slice off your skin or whatever.
Yeah.
So why would you stick the other hand in?
Well, and
after the needle already falls in.
Yeah, it's because and it's definitely one of those things that like, yes, the gas could be hindering her sense of choice there.
Sure.
And I do love how she sees like the tape there for her and she's like, I'm not listening to the tape, I'm just getting the syringe.
Right.
I thought that was kind of a funny moment there that I would believe. But yeah, sticking a hand in and again not noticing the syringe is glued and so if you grab it from the top it's going to slip off and spill the contents of it.
Right.
You know, that's already like, I don't know, maybe one or two stupid mistakes.
Yeah, that's two dumb things.
Yeah,
in a row.
and then the absolute nail in the coffin is sticking the other hand off after it spills out.
Right.
Because I guess she's trying to free her hand. It's just, it is such a dumb trap.
It's also easy, like, you've obviously seen the fucked up kind of traps at this point. You know what's going on. There's stuff you could stick up in that hole and just see, you know what I mean? Just do a little testy poo.
Yeah, and she just doesn't do anything. And it's just like, I get it. Like, they are like, this is a cool trap. But in order for them to do it, they have to be an absolute moron.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the only way it works. So it's like, I guess for like hitting the trap quota, it's fine. It's just definitely really dumb.
It did feel the most shoehorned in of all the traps. Of like, here's another one, a Chinese finger trap. Woo, you know.
Yeah, it was dumb. And again, you have that silly, stupid moment where Xavier like walks in on her. She's like, "Oh, thank God, you're here to save me." And then he just comes up, looks at her neck, and just leaves. He's just...
I thought he was just going to kill her for some reason, because up to that point, he was just chasing and killing people.
Yeah, he's just absolutely deranged. He's like an absolute psychopath.
I thought he was like, okay, well, he's just like all completely off his rocker now, and he's going to kill her. Yeah. And then he didn't, and so that almost surprised me more, because I was like, okay, well, now I don't know what his reasoning for anything is. Like, he's suddenly rational, where he's like, oh, yeah, I don't have to kill at people to look at their back of their necks. Yeah.
Hell, maybe that's why Amanda was in this whole thing, because Jigsaw's like, yeah, this dude is really stupid and messed up. We need to ensure this goes well without him ruining everything. Like, maybe that's the reason, the true reason as to why she was there.
Yeah.
But who knows? And it's just dumb and silly, you know. Again, when he walks away, he's like, no, come back. Again, it's just like, oh my God, this is so off the rails, insane and crazy. Yeah. I don't know, and I feel like whenever it comes to twist, I understand, you know, editing twist, like, you know, she was in on it the entire time. It's hard, but it is also kind of like, if you really think about it deeply, whenever she she's obviously trying to go back to the initial room there, and then she looks down and she sees the blood is seeping down through there, which I guess maybe she was looking for some way for him to believably think. But even then, at that point, like, if someone said, here, let's go down this trapdoor, I wouldn't question it.
Right.
I would not question, like, how did you find it? No, I'd be like, I'm getting out of here, because clearly Xavier's gone off his rocker there and is just out for blood at this point. You can't convince me otherwise.
Right.
And so whenever he's, like, chasing him down and everything, it definitely makes it a little bit silly there. Yeah, I don't know. But it's pretty goofy, I would say, overall, but especially whenever they get to the bathroom there, and
I feel like they just needed a way to get to the bathroom, and they were like, Xavier's gonna chase you all the way there. These things are connected for some reason. I don't know what that tunnel system under that house is that connects to a bathroom, but
yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just like a really well thought out lair Jigsaw has
maybe
there, I suppose.
How long has he had cancer where he's like, well, let me build a subterranean layer? Like,
he gets busy. He does not hesitate. He has made the most out of his life currently, figuring out his days are really numbered. But yeah, whenever they get to the bathroom there, and they have that whole scene where it's like, like, I need the number on your guys' neck there. And then Amanda's like, well, how can you see your own number if I don't tell you? And then he looks for a mirror because otherwise it'd be even more questionable. But then he just decides because he's just insane. That's the only valid reason, is that he's absolutely insane. He just starts skinning the back of his own neck to get the number there, as opposed to being like, I'll find a mirror later or something. I don't know.
Surely there's a mirror in this house, or like, I will resort to skinning the back of my neck if you don't tell me. Like, why wouldn't he just, I don't, in that moment, why wouldn't he see that, like, all right, I'll keep you alive if you tell me the back of my neck or whatever, and I'll tell you I'll tell you the back of yours or whatever.
Yeah, like, do something like that, But he just immediately jumps to that. And then I guess, I will say I do like that, they are able to get a weapon because they pick up the saw that Dr. Gordon used to cut his foot off there. I felt like at the very least that was kind of a clever callback, I guess. And so then it's like the kid like goes up to slice Xavier's throat, because again, Xavier is just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs at this point there. And that's, again, going on during the whole cutting back and forth, flashing there. But I mean, as is, it's still an enjoyable film regardless of how critical I am of it. It's just the flaws are definitely way more apparent, and I have a harder time wrapping my head around them.
Oh yeah. Not even considering, even if he got all the numbers, how does he know what order they go in?
Yes. Yeah, it like the whole thing required teamwork, and they just did not want to work as a team.
Yeah.
They absolutely did not have the capability of working as a team.
Yeah.
They just completely crumbled and fell apart from the very get-go. Yeah, it's definitely a major flaw I have with this film there. Again, I understand it. I get it. I can believe that people could be this stupid, but it just, again, as opposed to like other films where even if they're stupid, I'm still like enjoying it. This is kind of like one of those like, kind of getting annoyed with the things. But still, that being said, there's still a lot of moments I enjoy. Even with Jigsaw, who's bloodied and beaten up to a pulp after Donnie just loses his bananas, saying like, all right, I'm tired of playing games with you. Tell me where my son is. And he's like, okay, I'll tell you where your son is. You're going to drive to this location, but you have to go alone. You have to go alone. And, again, Donnie's a meathead, so he's just going to go ahead and keep doing that. I do also like the small tidbit where, he's about to leave the car and Jigsaw's like, wait, you'll need this key to get inside the door. Just absolutely screwing with him.
There you go, buddy.
I will say it was very silly editing, because like when it doesn't, unlike the first film, end with like, the door closing on Donnie, it shows Amanda closing the door on Donnie, she's like, game over, and he's like, oh fuck, I go.
Yeah.
Doing usual anger Wahlbergs have.
Yeah.
And then it just cuts a Jigsaw who's bloodied, who's just like
Sitting in the
smiling,
dark.
and then it zooms out and it just looks like a cropped image zooming out.
Yeah.
It's so apparent there, because again, it is dark outside there, and it like, but could they have not just taken the time to try to do like a pan away shot or a fade away, not make it look like the screen itself is shrinking away? It's just it's just a silly edit there. But again, I feel like the silly edits do make it slightly enjoyable, but it is also just kind of cheap in other senses of the word. So I don't know. Overall, I'm fairly mixed whenever it comes to this film. I do like it, but I also have my issues with it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do feel like the twists were kind of earned, and the plot was pretty solid, and it's still a cool Saw movie, so it gets enough points for me. But yeah, there's just so much other stuff that is validly criticizable.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you kind of hit it on the head. Like, this is still an enjoyable film there. You know, again, just especially like I could see why this film, made a lot of money there. Because again, this is the film that kind of defined the Saw series for the rest of the franchise. Like, again, you look at it, it had a budget of $4 million. It made $147.7 million.
Oh, wow.
So it made oogle tons of money there, to say the very least. So you can't really argue with results there.
No, you can't.
Yeah, and so having this film not be helmed by James Wan, but instead Leigh Whannell, who also helped write the first one and played Adam in the first film, and Darren Lynn Bozeman, I feel like they did a fine job continuing the story there. It's just character decision wise and stuff like that, there's definitely a lot of issues.
Sure.
I have. So I think you just kind of said it best in the fact that I feel like it's just definitely one of those films that don't expect a masterpiece there, but just go in for a fun time, and you probably won't be disappointed.
A good old fun time with syringes in your legs.
Woohoo! How's about you and me jumping to that syringe pin right there like we did back in the days of yore?
Woohoo! Let's play find the syringe in the other syringe pit.
Woo! Oh my God. Any other points you want to hit on before closing the book on Saw 2?
No.
Okay, that's fair. That's totally and utterly fair. So
no, I mean, yeah, I feel like we covered it. So.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun getting to dissect this film there, and I'm glad I was able to enjoy a lot more aspects. But I was also sad to be hindered by a lot of the flaws there. But yep, let that be to determine if whether you want to watch it or not, or if you agree with us or not. It be what it be. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and tease you for the next episode. So, with this next episode, this film is one of the defining horror films of our generation, I would say. Like, this is one that, again, you probably have seen multiple parodies of. And not only that, but it started a trend of filmmaking there, which became much more apparent as this is, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it defined a sort of film genre.
Okay.
And it came out in 1999.
Is it the Blair Witch Project?
You betcha. Dadgum. That was... Man, you just said that with full confidence there, baby. Good job.
The whole genre, and it's like, yeah, and you said 1999. I was like, it's got to be Blair Witch.
Yeah, so we are going to be watching Blair Witch Project coming up on the next episode. So, thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see y'all again next time when we're popping the scary with the Blair Witch Project. Ooh. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @CoalkirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're popping the scary.